மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
D4, but important I say very loosely because in all my years in games of playing the Caro-Kann, never faced this idea here. So it's quite unusual. D3, D4. Most players who play this King's Indian setup are just trying to play the standard King's Indian moves. So this is not really the MO of King's Indian players. Suffice to say, after pawn takes D4 in order to meet the threat to our pawn, White plays pawn to D5. And here there's two ideas. There's a simple, not C5. C5 I don't believe is a good move there actually. There's a simple pawn takes D5 going for an active IQP type setup where the goal will be to establish this knight on E4 and the pieces just sort of develop themselves here. So that's a really easy low theory option to know. But another option that's popular here is knight f6, and the idea is to play more aggressively here, maintain this pawn on D4 as long as possible, and black will generally play moves like castles and then bishop f5, rook c8, try to target this backwards c2 pawn. So I think that's good enough, at least considering the amount of effort that you need to spend for a line that you'll likely never even face. But g3 here is more popular, against which I play knight f6, but in my youth I used to prefer knight e7, which is sort of like my pet line. The idea here is to play more aggressively with ideas of f5 and then play knight d7, knight f6, try to establish this big center. So this is quite an ambitious way to play, but I don't believe it's necessary nowadays, and I prefer the move knight f6, bishop to g2, castles, and knight to d7. It's also possible to play rook e8, usually these moves transpose. I've played both. Knight d7, now for example, rook e1 was played in one of my games, and now rook e8. So white has really set up the standard King's Indian formation, and now has to make a choice. So I faced this move in a similar position, but not this one. A common idea is c3, which potentially plans ideas of b4. Against this, I always like playing a5 to prevent white from doing that. Maybe I'm going to gain space in the future, but ideally I just want to play queen c7, in some positions knight f8, or just leave the knight in d7 as it can go to c5. And then I'd like to play b6, and then bishop a6, or bishop b7, depending on the circumstances. And I believe black is completely fine here with a lot of control of the center and all its pieces developing. A move that I faced quite a lot here, surprisingly, is b3, including a game against a grandmaster. And against this move, over the board, I managed to find a very strong idea that is also, as I later found out, quite a strong idea that's been played before. I played the move a5. Again, the key idea in this line, trying to play a4. If my opponent was to play a4, then it weakens a lot of dark squares. So you played the move a3, potentially meaning to play b4 against a4. And now I just played d4, locking down the c3 outpost. And I think white's game is already getting very difficult here, and I will attach actually a game that I played in this line. The whole point here is that I'm going to play the move a4. So let's give white a random move here, like h3. I want to play the move a4. If he takes it, then I can play knight b6, and the structure is just horrible. The knight may hop into c3. And if white plays a move like b4 here, then I'm going to play a move like b5 in order to stop knight c4, and then I'm going to play c5. And this is going to blow open the queen side for white, and my pieces are just going to crash through and take advantage of all these weak pawns and squares. So the King's Indian against the Caro-Kann, not threatening at all. You have like two options. I briefly mentioned playing knight e7 here, which I've used with a lot of success, but nowadays I sort of play more control, just knight f6, take my space, and then of course the key move in a lot of these lines is a5 to grab some space or prevent our opponent from grabbing space. So that is the King's Indian versus the Caro-Kann, which leads us to the final options, and most of these, as I mentioned, are quite rare, and you can even skip them if you would like, but just for completeness sake, and in case you're interested in some of these variations, I'm going to round up all our coverage. So very quickly, another line that is similar to some variations of the maybe exchange variation, I should say, most closely related to is knight f3. And the idea here, white captures on d5, captures and plays knight e5. And I've faced this a couple of times because this variation, I believe, was recommended in a book series called Secrets of Opening Surprises. So some players picked up this idea. But of course, it looks too suspicious to be any good for white. He's moving his piece twice in the opening. He's exchanging a central pawn. And the idea of knight e5 is he wants to get some quick bishop e5 in, potentially cause trouble. But suffice to know, knight f6, and then the plan here is just g6, bishop g7. And this is similar to some of the variations I covered in the exchange variation here. And bishop b5 check is always met with knight to d7. So That's simple enough. Some more maybe dangerous lines here include the Blackmore-Deemer transposition, where white plays f3 here. So this is, of course, when I say Blackmore-Deemer, I mean the gambit that arises after d4, d5, e4. So it's in a very similar style here. We have after d4, d5, knight c3 here, f3. White's trying to gambit this pawn. This is a gambit that you only have to know a little bit about, I believe, to sort of play the position with relative confidence. We want to take on f3, knight takes. Now we're going to play knight f6. And white will have the open f file, and white's going to have open pieces and diagonals, diagonals and files, but we're going to be very, very solid here. And as long as we keep our vigilance out, and as long as we keep vigilant and keep a lookout for white's tactical ideas, should be completely fine. I'm going to arm you with a couple more ideas here. So bishop c4, this is the most testing, most annoying option from white, I would say. We're going to play bishop f5. We're going to put this bishop in f5, drop it back to g6 to solidify our kingside. Now white commonly plays knight e5, aggressively attacking, e6, castles. So here, when I say be on the lookout, keep vigilant. If you want to play a move like bishop e7, can be in for a nasty shock after knight f7, king f7, rook f5. So these are the types of tactics we've got to look out for. But similar to the fancy variation here, we can just develop and prevent our opponent's threats at the same time. For example, bishop g6 here is very effective, which I alluded to. Completely solidifies that file. Our next couple of moves are bishop e7, knight d7. We can even castle. Consider moves like c5, b5, b4. I'm not going to say white has no compensation here. I believe white, of course, has compensation in practical play here. There's that open f-file, but a pawn is a pawn, and our solidity isn't going away. So I believe this is a perfect start for black. If you want to give me this position in the opening, I'll take it every time. Now, black is white. The onus here is on white to prove if he has any chances for the pawn, whereas our task is just to just develop and hopefully laugh in white's face that his attempts are short. So that's the Blackmore-Deemer. In a similar vein, one very funny line here that I'll give a mention. I've heard it being referred to as the hillbilly attack, and that is the move bishop c4. So quite a silly name or quite an unusual name for this line. And this looks like a beginner's move because it just gets hit by d5. So if white wants to take, he's losing tempi here. This is absolutely nothing. But this gambit here has actually been played by Magnus Carlsen, although in a blitz game. And it does have a following at the club level, so I guess I'll give it a mention here as well. Bishop b3 is the idea, and after pawn e4, queen h5. So it's like white is trying to build up the scholar's mate here. So, so as I mentioned, Carlsen actually played this variation against Tomaszewski, who's a 2700 plus GM, and he actually won that game. But I believe that speaks more to how strong Carlsen is. And here, black has a couple of satisfactory options. The only reason I'd like to cover this is because, I guess, just so you're aware that some stuff like this exists. So even though Tomaszewski lost the game to Carlsen, he actually had a pretty good approach to the opening. He played e6 here. As I mentioned, g6 is also possible to nullify this bishop, rather this one here. And then Carlsen played the move knight c3, and then after knight f6, queen h4, this is white's idea. He wants to put this queen on this potentially aggressive attacking square. Tomaszewski just played the move knight to d7, just calmly developing, not caring about the pawn. If white was to take on e4, then black can do a number of things here, but probably he just wants to play knight c5, grab this bishop pair, and then develop normally and make this guy count in the future after either e5 or c5, where the bishop can get activated. So instead, Carlsen continued in gambit style here, played the move f3. Now again, lots of continuations here, but Tomaszewski came up with an interesting option of knight c5 anyway, targeting this bishop. And when Carlsen played pawn takes e4, he played the nice tactical shot, knight takes e4 here, and of course the knight is immune because the queen is hanging, so black was up a pawn. White did have a little bit of compensation and ended up winning the game. I should mention it was a blitz game, so this of course increased white's chances of success, but in general I don't believe that black should be in any trouble here, and of course should feel good about the position. So those were two quick gambits we covered. And last variation I can give a mention to that I faced several times, I guess, but not really enough to give it a big mention, is this move queen f3 here. So this is an interesting option here. It actually does make some sense. There's a sort of like a trap here. If we play d4, which is actually what I played the first time I played this position, my opponent plays bishop to c4, and now there's mate here. It's very scary. And there was some tactic my opponent landed on me involving like bishop takes f7, I believe, here, and then following with e5. Maybe it was something like this, but I don't have the game score as it was like a long time ago, and the blitz game. So, okay, maybe some traps in this line. I believe a really simple way to. So there's two ideas here. If you're feeling really aggressive, and it's kind of, there's really no reason you have to know this line, but it's a pretty cool idea. So I'd like to share with you. You could play this crazy looking e5, and well, maybe not so crazy, but just sacrificing this pawn, trying to punish white for his play. The idea here is after pawn d5, knight f6, pawn c6, knight c6, knight's coming to d4. We're going to harass this poor queen. Bishop b5, bishop d7. Again, knight d4 ideas. If takes, this queen is getting harassed. So e5 is like this crazy looking gambit option. But otherwise, you can simply rest easy and play a move like pawn e4, knight e4, and now knight to d7. Playing very solid here. The idea is, of course, we want to just play knight f6 without getting our pawns doubled. It's also possible to play knight f6 right away, by the way. So knight d7 also prevents bishop c4 because of knight e5. And for example, if white plays d4, now we can play the move like knight f6. And the resulting position is very solid, very Caro-Kann-esque nature. Again, white can throw a million things at us in the opening. Here I just want to spend the final part of the DVD and the final part of this chapter going over some of the lines that I've personally faced, and just want to put them in here in case you know someone who plays these lines and maybe you're looking to prepare against them. But otherwise, these lines normally should appear in 0.001% of your games, if that. But this would be a complete sort of picture of what white can do here. I hope I've been completely comprehensive in the Caro-Kann here in this sideline section, and I believe now you are totally armed not only to deal with the main lines, but even all sorts of crazy sidelines and quirky lines, such as even the hillbilly attack.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.